Oh my God. Okay, we're just gonna start. Hello, it's my birthday. It's not. It's my mom's birthday, actually. Um, and also my best friend Laura's birthday, although she celebrated it on my yesterday because she lives in Australia. But I suppose for her, I went to World Market and I got Walker's mince pies. Because you may not know, maybe like me, if you're an American, you thought mince pies had mincemeat in them, and apparently they do not anymore. I think of mince pies, I'm thinking of like a medieval king and his uh, banquet, his feast, his mince pies. But apparently those are meat pies. And mince pies retain the name from their origin, but they have just like a fruit mixed with spices that is spiced in a way that to me tastes very Christmassy, even though it is not a tradition that my family had having mince pies. But um, they're very good, very decadent. Walker brand certainly knows how to put as much butter as physics will allow into their breads and their shortbreads. So highly recommend. Um, for my mother, she's currently in a memory care facility, probably permanently. Well, maybe not this one specifically, but she's in the latest stages of dementia, uh, which has not I have not named until this point. It's kind of sad to say, but she doesn't recognize my dad anymore. Really has no sense of time, and even like at the place we go to, the call button, instead of it being like, at a hospital, you'd have that remote, it's just a thing around your neck. And just one button, and she still has trouble finding the button. So it's pretty rough, but I got it. Since it's so close to Christmas, I got her, this is a rosemary Christmas tree, which I got a number of years ago at Trader Joe's, and she really loved it. It's one of the things that was like a thoughtful gift that she always asked for. And they didn't have it at Trader Joe's. I got a lavender one because I thought that's it would have to do, but there was a rosemary one at Fry's, which is our Kroger, which I wasn't even going to go to, except that was the Trader Joe's didn't have balloons. I got this balloon. Oh my god. Okay, so this, okay, this is not so good. This is supposed to be like a cupcake. She's having trouble. I mean, part of it there's the dementia element, but also she's had surgery recently. Actually, two surgeries, all around her abdominal area, and she really is having trouble eating food at all. Um, Insures have been good, but this is a chocolate pudding, but it's supposed to look like a cupcake. And there's sprinkles in the pudding as well. Um, and then I thought my tree has a party hat just like me. This brown lump is Kayla. Are you there? Did you die? Hi. Shh, sorry, you're sleeping. I love you. Oh my god. She's grumpy because the what am I saying? Our pack has been not together for too long. And she's gonna have to adjust to the fact that it's just gonna be two. I got this. I started getting this tree because it's a little tree for our little family, just me and mom and dad, and doggy, um, and my uncle George in spirit. He used to live very close, but that's the only close by family we have. Um, I was earlier today. I was listening to a book by Alan Watts, who is a philosopher from like the early 20th century. Um, and I wanted to listen to more audiobooks while playing Pokemon Go to kill two birds with one stone. The intellectual stimulation with the movement, but with, a little bit of a dopamine incentive. which is really ironic given what I'm about to talk about and what he was talking about. But I only got like 30 minutes in, and already I was like wanting to get in a conversation with him and talk about stuff. But it really, first of all, in the foreword to the third edition, they explained that he was 24 when he wrote it. And immediately I was like, I was having like PTSD from like undergraduate philosophy classes. Like, what does a 24-year-old white guy telling me his opinions about philosophy sounds like? A hell I do not want to return to. But I'll let the words speak for themselves. I'm not trapped in a class. I could just turn it off if I want to. And this is a well-respected philosopher, and this book is highly regarded. Doesn't mean I need to like take it as gospel, but it's fine. But the first thing, it was a book on happiness, and he started touching on something that I had written about when I was in Chicago, which is this idea that like I personally feel like I'm chasing the idea of contentment, chasing the feeling of contentment, which is, I can't decide if it's like uncharacteristically or characteristically stupid of me that that is really not thinking about what contentment means or is. Because contentment is the lack of chasing, right? Contentment is when you are not chasing, the act of just being and feeling okay in that energy. I think the tricky part is colloquially, when we think of contentment, it is something kind of inherently aspirational, or something that takes work to achieve. There's some external situation that you have to work towards that gives you permission to feel it, like a certain level of financial security, or a certain amount of like social support, a social a social system. I don't know, a small community or family. Like there's certain things, and then that is what guarantees you contentment, or at least allows you to feel contentment. And I think what he was saying is that contentment is, if it is the act of not seeking, it's kind of like running away from your own feet. Like it is within you at all times. You make the choice. But saying that, saying the phrase like, you just have to stop chasing and you will find contentment. I feel like that kind of comes across, the feeling I get when I hear that is like going to your cupboard and opening it and it's empty, and someone telling you, well, food's just gonna come if you wait. Is it? Not really been my experience. Oh, you haven't given it enough time. It's like, ugh. As ever, and I think now, the language of psychology has come enough to the general public that we can name the enemy. Well, not dopamine is a problem, and but I think reading this little bit, it's got the gears churning, and what I was thinking about is nothing new. It just was put in a real black and white perspective about how it's not just like, you talk about a dopamine detox to get away from your phone addiction or whatever, and it's not even like the problem is the two things cannot coexist, right? Because dopamine is the chemical to catalyze chasing. It's what gets the human animal to chase the gazelle, to find the stream of cleanish water, to find the cave. We, as like animals, we need that motivation because sometimes it can be quite hard, and we're kind of like maybe naturally lazy, I don't know. Or just like it takes a lot of energy. But so the brain is like, go find the thing. Then that moment of finding it, you get that reward. And that chase itself, there's some satisfaction in the chase and then the get. But the problem is that dopamine hits only in a moment. So that does not really match the definition of contentment, which is something sustained. And happiness too, I feel like feels like an emotion that you should be able to sustain, although depending on what like philosophy you're talking about and how they define it, happiness can, I think when people talk about happiness, maybe really what they're chasing is a feeling of like ecstasy, um, or like some kind of elevated state that is beyond like equilibrium, and that's also not really sustainable. So chasing that idea is probably also problematic. But you see how, if you imagine you're in the woods, a dark woods, and you get these little fleeting glances, and it's like some sort of like fey creature or something that's trying to lure you or to keep you stuck, and maybe it mimics the voice of a lost loved one or something, and it's like that chase is not only a problem, it is keeping you from contentment, because contentment is the act of being still and sitting in acceptance and gratitude for what is. You can't do both. You can't be chasing and sitting. Does that make sense? And so the really sinister part, which again we know, but in this context it becomes to me a lot more obvious the evil of it, is these social media apps and whatever else that is crafted by the people with an intelligence that is terrifying, who are using that to learn about and then exploit human psychology to the greatest degree, to craft these apps in a way that manipulates the way that you seek dopamine and you want, it's like rewiring your brain to think that that little hit of dopamine is the happiness. It is mimicking the loved one's voice in the lost woods. It's saying, "Oh, this is it." But it is to their financial advantage to keep you in a state of constant discontentment, because they want you on that hamster wheel. They want you to always be chasing. That is to say, these companies are in the business of making you miserable for their own financial gain. And walking away from that is, to me, putting it that way sounds like more of something I should prioritize. And also realizing that it is actively getting in the way of my happiness, and is also reprogramming my brain to run past what I'm looking for. You know, it's it's teaching me that life is a constant chase. And that's just counter to everything that most Eastern and Western philosophy has thought. And I think, with the exception of maybe Seneca, a lot of these guys and gals, unfortunately, mostly guys that we have been preserved, their writings, can't really speak to the experience of like extreme degradation in the human experience, slavery, torture, starvation. And, so when they say that contentment or joy is always accessible, I think we need, we need a little bit of an addendum and a little bit of we got to have stoicism. Maybe stoicism is necessary for that situation. It's a very brutal philosophy for a brutal circumstance. Um, and so I think that is possibly the exception that proves the rule, though, is that if if you think of a caveman who has his little group, has a cave and a fire and enough cleanish water and enough elk meat, right? Has all that. The rest of it is kind of gravy. Like he can find contentment in theory, psychologically. And you kind of have to think about how that applies in modern life. What does that look like? A roof over your head, enough calories to get through the day, at least some kind of social, like like a family, whether that's found family or natal family situation, like a support system. Um, you think of the trope of the busy business dad in a movie who is chasing something, chasing success, chasing acclaim. Um, when the irony is like everything he needs is what, he is rushing past and, kissing absentmindedly on the head as he rushes out the door. Like, whatever feeling of validation or love, acceptance, like it's all there at home, probably. And it's like the dichotomy of Bob Cratchit and Ebenezer Scrooge, to bring it back to Christmas, right? It's like Ebenezer Scrooge was just chasing the money for number go up. I think he would have loved Cookie Clicker, actually. Ebenezer Scrooge would. And then Bob Cratchit, his job was really just a necessary evil in living in this very harsh world. His harsh physical circumstances, but all of it, in that first song. I'm thinking of the musical because that's my reference point to it. Everything, every penny that he made was just to contribute to the joy of his children and his wife and his family. The toys they bought, making everything special, making every every little penny, stretching it to extract as much like fun and love and moments of joy that he could. And it didn't, like, to achieve that, to have that happy Christmas, didn't take the world. They just not needed to be like not starving. And if Bob Cratchit was, he was chasing, he was doing the job, like that is not what he wants to be doing. Everything he had is in front of him. It's just like he had to put enough money on the table, to make enough money to put food on the table, to maximize his time with them. Anyway, I'm just thinking about, like, if my New Year's resolution is to like reduce screen time, it's like it is a more dire situation than I think we realize. But also, I would say, people talk about dopamine detox and it sounds like impossible. I kind of think that's propaganda. And I won't say like there's like a specific source, but like again, it really benefits these companies, social media sites, or whatever, for you to believe that this is an addiction that's impossible to get out of, and also is just like baked into the way that our lives work now. And also that like there's irreparable damage done already, like your brain is like fucked up already. That also benefits them, because then you think, well, I'm already fucked anyway. right? So, and I don't think that's true. I actually don't think what they don't want you to realize is that it probably wouldn't take that long if you just stood still, metaphorically, sit in this discomfort of not moving, it feeling like stagnant, lazy, maybe if the addiction is like career oriented. That's the other thing is like, if you have all the survival needs met, not having contentment, I would want to say, is like a skill issue. But the problem is, it's not only that it's not a skill that is taught, it is something that we were taught was bad. It is what contentment looks like. Our society has trained us is like lazy, is unambitious, is these sorts of things. And so it takes a lot to sit and let yourself feel lazy. I mean, maybe you have to cordon off a certain amount of time for yourself. So just to kind of ease that neurotic part of your brain for a moment, I'm just giving myself like a week. Let the Fae mimic the voice of the person that you are trying to find. There's going to be eerie creaking noises that you're trying to run away from. Maybe it's dark, you're looking for the light. Mm-mm-mm. What you're looking for is a feeling of safety, security, a lack of anxiety. And you will find that all of those things realistically are come from within. Safety safety really is just a feeling that you cultivate because in an absolute sense we're never safe and we don't know how much peril we're in realistically. We know there's a lot of existential threats and how far away are we from being from like a nuclear holocaust? Who knows? How do you feel safe in that? I struggle with this. Um, it's it's not a choice, but it's a feeling you cultivate. It's an environment that you create for yourself that is, in many ways, just psychological. And anxiety is reduced, by acceptance, I think, which chronic worriers like myself, easier said than done. What do you mean? Just accept. What does that look like? I think that's also something that it doesn't come overnight. What does it really mean to accept? Honestly, really the way to power level acceptance is just like extreme suffering. That sounds very dark, but that has kind of been my experience. Is like it's like you end up being on the biggest scariest coaster at the theme park and you go on that and then every other ride feels like easy peasy. But what that looks like in terms of suffering, like in a human sense, really sucks. um, Stoicism will get you through that. um, but I don't think it takes as long as people think to sit in that discomfort of being unreactive, not chasing, not running away, tending to your nervous system rather than, like people with OCDs or with phobias, running away from the thing just kind of reinforces to your brain that this is something that is scary. So, in as much as you can, realizing that the solution to the discomfort is not to remove the thing that is triggering you. You have to know your limits, obviously, in the moment. It's like what your human animal brain can stand, right? Be gentle with yourself. But I just don't think it would take that long. And that's really what companies, I mean, now, again, for the Christmas season, what companies don't want you to think about, that, you know, they'd rather you be out shopping for stuff, being neurotic about what the Christmas party is going to look like, setting things, you know, all these external things. Is like really everything that you need to have the most beautiful Christmas is just the people, and making space to be completely present with them, you know. And I'm going to avoid the temptation to say like phone bad, but I'm talking about any sort of distraction, that takes you away from that real deep connection with sitting with that person. And holiday parties, you know, sometimes there are people that we don't need to, we're creating boundaries with. You know, we don't need to be giving all of ourselves to, but likely there are people there who, you know. And I think the comforting thing for me is a lot of Christmas movies, especially the ones that I grew up on, like the Peanuts Christmas movies. When I'm thinking of also some Sesame Street Christmas movie with Elmo. I don't remember what it's called, and I haven't seen it since. But they all come back to this message of like, you know, what is important. And Christmas as a holiday, it gives me hope that this is like one big ritual that we as secular society have preserved to reaffirm our values going into the new year, ritualistically giving each other gifts, gathering together as family, sharing food, sharing love, like what is important in this lifetime. We are reminded, as long as we're present with it and thinking about it, and remembering that the core of it, the real core of it, is the love, is the gratitude, is the setting aside time to just be with one another. And even though, you know, it's difficult. My mother has always been a difficult woman, and she made choices in how she raised me that I left me with a lot of damage. Not to speak ill of her, but like that's just real. And I think, you know, there was a point at which she even kind of acknowledged that. In as much as I can, I still, you know, I want to have these moments with her. I think it would be hard to go into, I'm sure if me and my dad went in there and said, hey, it's your birthday, those words, I don't know if she would process that. But the rosemary, especially the smell, I'm not a doctor. This is just from my experience, the way that smell hits me. I feel like that might be able to cut through. And you know, the party hat and all that. I feel like that would tell her mind. That would remind her. That would feel more visceral. So, anyway. Merry Christmas. Merry early Christmas. Hug your loved ones. Hug your animal friends. Hi. Do you want to say hi? Or are you still sleepy? Thank you. Oh, I'm so sorry. I won't bug you. I love you. Anyway, thank you guys.